Dan, all I'm going to say is... I mean, I was going to say have fun editing this episode, but I have to edit Batman vs. Superman, so I guess what goes around comes around. We're all going to have to edit one of these.
Yeah.
So.
I'm glad, honestly, that I'm getting mine over with the first one.
It's true.
Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Feature Length Podcast, a podcast where we talk about movies and TV for about a feature length of time. And this podcast is hosted by myself, Carolina, as well as...
myself, Daniel.
And also myself, Marco.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Yep.
And today, as we told you at the end of our last episode and talked about for probably far too long, we are talking about Man of Steel, which is a movie that came out in 2013, and I actually have two summaries of, and I'm going to make my co-host choose which one. One of them I wrote yesterday while I was high because I thought that would be fun, and it's very long and not really summary, but more of a play-by-play of what I remembered of the movie. Or we can pick a summary that I actually wrote today, so take your pick.
I vote for the first one.
I do too, yeah.
So buckle in.
Surprise to no one.
Yeah.
I thought it'd be fun because we all kind of agree that this movie and the next two movies are kind of shitty anyway, and we're mostly just going to be ranting and making fun of them. So I figured, a fun high
This is going to be a
review.
freewheeling episode for sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
100%.
absolutely.
Okay, so I titled it My High Amateur Summary of Man of Steel 2013. This is so long. I'm so sorry. Everyone strap in. So it starts with a baby being born on some other planet, ? Right after, there's like a war. Some guy betrays the country or something, although it's not a country, it's a planet. And the planet's going to explode, so they send the fresh baby away in a pod. Spoiler alert, the baby in the pod is Superman. His name is Cal. So now we're on Earth, and I think he was first shown as an adult, and then back to a kid, then adult, then teen, or some kind of that order. Anyway, he worked at an oil rig and in a restaurant, and he helped people, and as a kid, he realized he was super strong, and his dad told him to hide it, and then his dad died in a tornado. That scene was wild. Low-key, as a kid, didn't you kind of want to fly around in a tornado? Didn't it seem kind of fun, or was that just me? Like a spinny roller coaster on air, kinda. Anyways, he saved his whole school. I haven't read this since I wrote it, which is why I'm laughing so much, so please bear with me. Anyways, he saved his whole school bus from drowning as a kid, and his mom came to complain or say he was a miracle kid or something. Can't remember. That was part of it. There were lots of flashbacks. I low-key liked those better than the current action stuff. Anyway, about the current action, there's some kind of alien ship that landed somewhere in the high Arctic, and he somehow hears about it and decides to check it out. I guess because as a kid, his parents told him he arrived in a foreign craft and that he was an alien. Was that why? I can't remember. Anyways, the army's there, but also him for some reason, and also Lois Lane, the reporter, and he sneaks away at night, and the reporter follows him, and a hologram of his father is there, or his consciousness, whatever, and he learns his real name and about his potential, and the reporter also gets in, but something hurts her, I think, because he saved her life or whatever ultimately, and then disappeared, and his dad consciousness told him basically he can fly because of the sun or the atmosphere or something, or gravity acting on his alien cells. So he starts doing that, and he gets a suit from the ship, and the reporter tracks him down, and there are vibes, and she leaks a story about him and the craft. But I don't remember where the bad guy comes back, but maybe I was peeing, but he comes back and says he wants Superman, but no one knows where he is except Lois, and she tries to not give him up, but ultimately they find him somehow. I think he gives himself up, because if not, they threatened war on the world, I think. But they want him and Lois Lane for some reason, so they go, and Superman writhes for a bit, and his dad's consciousness is there and tells Lois how to defeat the bad guys for some reason, and then they reveal this thing that contained all of Superman's people's DNA or something, and so they wanted to restart their planet on Earth, so Superman had to stop them, and it was this whole epic battle during which I was making banana bread and everything else I showed in our Instagram story, and then the world was saved, and that was the ultimate result. I guess stuff happened in the middle. I think Lois and Superman kissed or something. The end.
Wow.
Carolina, that was, I'm not even this isn't a bit, that was the most detailed summary we've ever given for a movie on this show. And that's good, because I'm always worried after we like record an episode that like there wasn't enough context for people who haven't seen the movie. That will not be a problem.
Also,
time.
I feel like that summary was also a detailed summary, but was also such a perfect critique of everything wrong with this movie that there's like I don't even know what else to say. It's just like you nailed it in the summary. It's like there's a lot of flashbacks.
You also nailed the delivery. Like you didn't even stop for a breath.
I just saw the like chunk that it took up in my notes, and I was like, "Oh God, I can't do this for 10 minutes. We gotta go." I'm out of breath a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, but I just sat down and was inspired and wrote down everything my little brain could remember, and that's what we got.
That was fantastic.
Yeah, 10 out of 10 summary.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you want to? How short is the other one? Because I kind of want to hear it in comparison.
It's
like
like
if
a
it's
tiny
not too long.
paragraph that I wrote.
Okay,
like,
do you want to read that
10
one too?
minutes ago. Yeah, it's also based on just what I remembered because I obviously wasn't paying that close attention because it's Man of Steel. So this is just Man of Steel is a 2013 film directed by Zack Snyder, starring Henry Cavill and Amy Adams. It's about Superman, who I think is a pretty ubiquitous character, so I don't need to describe him anymore, but this film kind of gives the backstory of how he ended up on Earth and what makes him so super, and covers his life from childhood to adulthood and him doing good, and the bad guys from his planet come, I guess General Zod, and he betrayed the planet, but I don't remember how or why, and now he's come to Earth to find Superman because he has the DNA of the whole species and wants to repopulate the Earth with it, and that's kind of it, without all the in-the-middle details.
Yeah, I prefer the other one.
Me
for
too.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, because, I mean, it is just kind of like... I also find it interesting how they decided to do, like, Superman's origin story, but then also this big battle. It seems like a lot, but that's what it was, you know. They did what they did, and it was a movie.
Yeah, that's the problem with a lot of origin stories.
Yeah.
It's
Although
just a
I
lot
will
of ground
say-
to cover. I mean, I guess people assume, like, it's Superman, everyone knows, but... I don't know.
We're going to go into a bunch of stuff that we didn't like with this movie, because there's a lot, but I'll just say at the beginning, like, one of the things I actually did kind of like for this origin story was the flashback method, rather than a completely linear storytelling method. I found that was one of the more effective and interesting elements of this movie, so I'll just say that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. You know what's funny, like, yeah, I think all three of us clearly don't really love this movie. Also, okay, so just for context, like, Carol, this was your first time ever watching it, right?
Yeah, I was going to bring us back after. We deviated from form with my very long intro, but it was my first time watching it. The only film of this trio we're going to be watching that I've seen is Batman vs. Superman. So this was my first time, which is why I have so many blanks. Because if I wasn't paying attention, it's just not there.
Dan, how many times would you say you've seen it?
I actually own this movie, and I saw it in theaters in 2013. And back then I actually kind of liked it. And this is my first ever Blu-ray that I owned.
Wow.
Fun fact. My collection has grown so much more expansively since then. But anyway, so yeah, I've seen this movie probably like 4 or 5 times now, in total. And this last time, I really realized that I think each time I watched this movie, my enjoyment of it decreased a little bit each time. And it's definitely worlds away from how much I enjoyed it in the theater in 2013.
Yep. I've seen this movie a bunch. I saw it like 3 times in theaters, and then I also owned it on Blu-ray.
Loved it?
Yeah, well, you know, I think it's important. Like, a lot of stuff we've been talking about in the chat has just been about the context around this movie.
Yeah.
And like how important I think that is to understanding why we all had a positive reaction when it first came out and how things have kind of shifted. Yeah, like what I was saying, like this is not a great movie, but I really firmly believe deep inside this movie there is a great Superman movie. And like every once in a while something happens where I'm like, oh, that's like great Superman thing. Like, there's like 3 scenes in this movie in particular that I just think nail Superman stuff, like what's important about Superman. Also, I just want to point out, I think out of everyone here, I'm gonna be the hardest on these DC movies, and I think for context sake, it's important for people to know that it's coming from the perspective not of someone that doesn't like DC, but of like probably the biggest DC fanboy of like the amount of DC, like shelves of DC comics and long boxes of single issues and every DC animated movie ever and all the live action stuff. I mean, like, pre-MCU, really all there was to watch superhero content was the Chris Reeve Superman stuff and the Michael Keaton Batman stuff. So, like, that's what I grew up on, kind of pre-MCU. I mean, obviously, like, and Spider-Man movies and X-Men movies, but, So, I'm a massive DC fan. And, yeah, this coming out in 2013 with a lot of the context around it, I remember, I think, only seeing what I wanted to see, which is the good moments inside there, and really holding on to that. And then also just the thought of, like what we've talked about, okay, this is an origin movie. It has to reboot Superman's origin, which is a really hard thing to do for a lot of reasons. And then, it has to carry all that weight on its shoulders. And so I think really for me, when I started viewing this movie more negatively was after Batman vs. Superman came out, because I was like, okay, maybe the first movie wasn't perfect, but there was enough good stuff in there that we now have something to build from. And then the second movie came out, and it was an abomination, and I was like, oh no, so it was all for nothing. It's all bullshit. Like, it doesn't matter that there was some good stuff in Man of Steel. Yeah, so that's kind of my history of watching this movie. And on this recent rewatch, and I told you guys, I watched it specifically on the Blu-ray, Zack Snyder. Or it's not just Zack Snyder, but like there's a special features thing where you can watch the entire movie, but then there'll be like creatives will pop up and talk about different scenes in the movie as it's going. And it was like really insightful for me in terms of understanding. Like, I had all the context around it, but hearing the creators talk about it, I was like, I could like see the Matrix. You know what I mean? I was like, I understand why this movie happened and how it happened the way it happened. So that was that was the most interesting part of this rewatch for me.
So many connections to our past pod episodes. Sorry, I just had to bring that up. Matrix, Russell Crowe's in this.
I know.
That wasn't in my summary, sorry, but he is. Spoiler.
That's okay. It's right at the beginning of the movie. Yeah. But anyway, while we're on this topic, I'll just say I think one of the reasons I enjoyed this movie in theaters so much is because it was right on the heels of the ending of the Dark Knight trilogy, literally the next year over, and it was produced and partially written by Christopher Nolan. So I think just knowing that going in, and like how awesome I thought the Dark Knight trilogy was, and still do for that matter, I think going into this movie I was like, I am very ready for like a realistic take on Superman, even though my younger self thought that was maybe a good idea, and now like my present self realizes doing that with Superman maybe isn't a great idea. But yeah, so that was like an era ago, and things have changed for sure. But that's, I guess, that might be the rationale, is all I'm saying, for why I almost loved this movie when I came out of the theater, I think.
Yeah, well, I think you can say that without shame, by the way. 2013 was a long time ago, and
it was a long time ago.
I also probably would have loved it if superhero movies were inherently my jam. They're just not, so that's...
I was just excited. Basically, like, stemming off of what Marco was saying, like, I loved, like, the MCU was pretty much in full swing by that time, and I really would have liked to have seen that with DC. And that's what they tried to do, but that's not what panned
100%.
out.
Well, so let's get into the context then. Like, I just, it's so important to understand, I think, what happened and what went down and why it actually kind of worked for the time, but as time goes on, I think falls apart a little bit, right? So what people have to realize is that as much as Marvel is killing it with the MCU right now, DC Comics have been around since the 40s. Like, Marvel characters haven't existed since until like the Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko were making characters in like the 1960s. So there's like a whole...
Well, there was that very small like 40s little like Namor and Captain America, and
Absolutely.
then there was like nothing until the 60s.
Yeah. Well, the characters that like I would say like most notably in the MCU or like
there was that big boom of
exactly
the 60s. Yeah.
The Stan Lee characters, but so there's like a whole generation of people for who like Superman and Batman are like their touchstones when it comes to superheroes, and also I think even still talking today, as much as Marvel's killing it, like I think if you somehow did a poll to find out the 3 most popular, or you don't even do a poll, you can just look at like the comics that sell the most, like what comics have the most titles that sell, and it's still Batman, Superman, and Spider-Man, like, and 2 of those are DC characters. And the other thing is, right, like the first superhero movie is the Chris Reeve Superman movie from the 70s. That is a franchise that happens that is insanely iconic. It like that first Superman movie is like the quintessential Superman origin, right? And it gets so many things right about the characterization of Superman. Like we get our iconic actor playing Superman, who for everyone kind of going forward is Superman. The score, you have like a perfect score that everyone just agrees is like, yep, that's a perfect Superman theme. It's like a perfect Superman movie, and it's like the first superhero movie out of the gate. And then
sorry to interrupt. Did that one have the John Williams Superman?
Yes.
Okay, continue.
Yeah. John Williams, obviously best composer of all time. He's the GOAT.
Yeah.
Not even close. I mean, Hans Zimmer is amazing, but like,
yes.
Oh my god. Anyway, so like that happens. That whole franchise comes and goes. It ends up like in a really shitty place. And then there's no more Superman movies until 2005. When they make, or I think 2006, Superman Returns comes out. And this is like their first attempt at making a modern Superman movie. But the problem is that they were essentially making a sequel to the 1970s movies directly. So, like, if you watch that movie, it's really slow paced and it doesn't feel like a modern movie. And it's not a bad movie, but it just doesn't like hit the way a modern Superman movie should, because it feels like such an imitation of 1970s Superman, if that makes sense. So that happens. So that's basically where we are in terms of context with Superman movies. We haven't had a modern Superman movie. Like, all we've had is the Chris Reeve stuff, and everything is held in comparison to that. But other than that, no modern Superman. The other thing that's going on at the time, like Dan talked about, is Christopher Nolan has just come off the Dark Knight trilogy, which has successfully, unlike Superman Returns, reinvigorated the Batman franchise, right? No one's comparing it to Michael Keaton. It's totally its own thing, and it's great, and people love it. Academy Award winning. Fantastic. That ends in 2012. Also at this time, Marvel has done the MCU. Avengers, the first Avengers comes out in 2012, right? So we have all of Phase 1 and the first Avengers. So this is what DC is looking at. DC is looking at a scenario where they haven't had a modern Superman movie. Marvel has just created like the most successful superhero movies of all time using what at the time were like C-list characters. Like nobody gave a shit about Iron Man before the Iron Man movie. I mean, like the Hulk, yeah, Captain America, they're pretty well known, but like nobody gave a shit about Thor. And like the whole thought of
Hawkeye and Black Widow.
Exactly.
It's like the first time we've ever seen them live action.
Absolutely, totally C-list characters. And they made that work and are making lots of money. And DC is sitting there and they're thinking to themselves, how the fuck do we have the most recognizable superhero IP on the planet and we haven't made a modern movie? Let alone, why aren't we creating a universe of characters as well when, again, 2 out of 3, like, even if just Batman and Superman, even if the rest of their characters were shit, like, that is worth building a universe around. And they have other cool characters as well. So 2013, DC really is trying to start a universe with all of that context behind them. So they did what I think a lot of executives sometimes do, which is take the exact wrong lesson, which is they said, okay, so the only modern DC movies that have ever worked were the Christopher Nolan ones, which means that all DC movies need to inherently be dark and sad, which is so stupid because like the DC universe, it is built on like the tone of what a Superman movie should be, which is like hopeful and inspiring, and like Batman works because he's a dark spot against that backdrop. You know what I mean? Like Gotham is a shithole, and like Batman is depressed and angsty. Not everyone. Like Metropolis should be like a Metropolis. It should be awesome and great, you know? Like you need that contrast for there to be any interest. And I'm actually going to quote something from The Dark Knight, which I think explains what happens, where Batman and Alfred are talking, and Batman's trying to understand like where the Joker came from, and Alfred's like, you have beat the shit out of all the criminals in Gotham, and like in their fear they unleashed someone that they didn't understand. Like they turned to a man that they didn't understand. And I think that's what happened with DC and Zack Snyder. I think what happened is DC was like, okay, we need a modern Superman movie. Unlike Superman Returns, it needs to have action. We have to distance ourselves from Chris Reeve, and we have to start a universe. And Zack Snyder came in with the pitch for this movie, which is not a Superman movie. It is literally a sci-fi action movie. And they were like, yeah, that fulfills all that criteria. But what they didn't understand is that Zack Snyder fundamentally doesn't get or care about Superman or anyone but Batman. And even though he cares about Batman, he doesn't understand Batman.
I was going to say, even though like you could say he cares about any of these characters, but that's not enough because he's like a kid given millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars to make a movie that looks cool.
Yes. And the other thing that's... So I knew all that... So for context, I knew all that context. And I think, like Dan and I alluded to, seeing this movie in 2013, kind of knowing that context, like as comic book fans of there hasn't been a modern Superman movie, DC's trying to start a universe, I think it goes a long way. And then you see this movie in the theater and it's like, yeah, you know, it's great. There's lots of stuff in there that you could totally build from. What was really fascinating, though, was when I was watching those special features this time around, because it became so clear to me that, with the exception of maybe David Goyer, who was I think one of the writers on this movie, right?
He was the main writer.
Yeah, he also wrote Batman Begins. With the exception of David Goyer, I don't think anyone else was interested in making a Superman movie. Like, just for example, at the beginning of the movie, there's like a 30-minute scene on Krypton.
Yeah.
Where there's
that scene, watching it back this last time, that was longer than I remember.
Oh my god. It goes on.
It was much longer.
The movie in general is a lot longer than
yeah. But I mean, it was like a much bigger percentage than I remember it being, this Krypton part.
So I'm watching these special features, and they're talking about how they brought in these linguists to like create a Kryptonian language. That way all the inscribings on all the Kryptonian stuff actually all meant something. And they're going into like 10 minutes of detail about the work they had to put into creating this Kryptonian language. And it just like, when I was listening, but then you get to the scenes in the movie that kind of work, and nobody's there talking about like what was happening or like how those scenes came together. And I think it's just so funny to me. It's so indicative that what they're most proud of is the stuff that has nothing to do with Superman. It's like, I don't give a shit that you went... This isn't a sci-fi movie. You don't need to like hit the sci-fi hard. You need to hit the Superman stuff hard. And you didn't. And the times that you do, it's clear that it wasn't your intention. It's just David Goyer, I think, personally, and I don't know, Dan, if you agree with me on this, I think like part of the reason the Batman Begins screenplay is so good and that movie works is I think he does a really good job of like not necessarily taking moments from Batman comics and putting them directly on screen, but taking like ideas that are repeated throughout Batman comics and then putting them into a moment, right? So when you talk about like
absolutely
like the thing that like, and really nailing who the character is. So like the one of the most iconic moments from Batman Begins is like after his house is burned down and he's sitting with Alfred like in the elevator and he's like bleeding out and he's talking with Alfred and he's like, man, I messed up. Like, this was all a mistake. I should not have done this. Like, I let you down. I let my parents down. This is ridiculous. And then like Alfred has the call back to the why do we fall so we can pick ourselves back up line. Like, that's not in any Batman comic, but also scenes like that are in lots of Batman comics because that is like a Batman moment. Like, I remember seeing that in the theater.
That's Alfred's character.
Yeah, and I'm like, you get it. Like, you understand Batman. And I think there are scenes like that for Superman in this movie. But I just think they're surrounded by so much fucking noise and explosions and just stupid shit at all times that they completely get wasted. Like, those scenes should be like the focal point of the movie, and instead they just disappear, and it's just so frustrating. It's like I wish someone else was directing this, because I think you could make this a good movie. It's so frustrating.
But I think maybe with the context of seeing all the Marvel stuff, like, part of what worked with that, or I mean, I don't know, it's not what worked, but just, I guess, what ended up happening is that a lot of people who didn't really care about the comics that much watched those films. So maybe they're like, okay, we're getting non-superhero people watching superhero movies. So, like, who cares if this isn't really about Superman? It's gonna get everyone, right? That's the era we're in, where anyone will watch a superhero movie, so let's just make it an action.
You're right. I do think that is what they were thinking. It's just like, it's Superman. Yeah. Like, well, you know, everyone gets it. But the problem, that's a double-edged sword, though. Because, everyone gets Superman, but also everyone fucking gets Superman. You know what I mean? Superman comes from a dying planet, is raised by the nicest couple on Earth. If he had landed anywhere else, would have been a sociopath. But because he's raised by these really good people, ends up being a hero. Like symbol of hope. Like, everyone gets that.
Didn't they make a horror movie about that?
Yeah, James Gunn made... It's not about, like, actually Superman.
Oh, yeah. It's, like, kind similar of a nod.
Yeah. Like, so everyone gets that concept. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. You guys get it. Yeah. Our parents' generation gets it. Our fucking grandparents... Like, everyone gets that. It's the most recognizable superhero. So when you start messing around with that and making it not that, and making it that not about hope and him being a symbol of hope, and you lean into the sci-fi action elements, it's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know who that's for, because you don't have to be... It's not like let me put it this way. Like, Guardians of the Galaxy. Nobody knew shit about Guardians of the Galaxy, and the Guardians of the Galaxy movie is different in tone than the Guardians of the Galaxy comics. But that's because nobody gave a shit about it, so James Gunn had free reign to kind of, like, interpret it and just make something interesting.
Yeah, what did they have to lose?
Yeah, whereas with...
they had nothing to lose.
With this, it's like... There's little room to fundamentally change things. Like, there are some things that have to be... Especially in an origin story. Like, I don't know.
And this is just kind of me speaking personally, but I'm not the biggest fan of Superman, especially compared to Batman. Like, his... Batman's lore to me is so much more dense and interesting than Superman. Yeah. Again, that's just me. But on that note, what I do like about Superman is when he's contrasted with Batman. Yeah. I don't like him too much on his own, but I like him... Like, I really wish a Batman and Superman movie would have been good. Yeah. Because that would have been so fun to see those two, the dichotomy of those two characters. And the reason is because Batman is, like, brooding, and you need like you need like a Captain America type character. Yeah. For Superman, and that's not that is absolutely not what this Superman was.
Absolutely. Well, and that's the other frustrating thing is, so Captain America First Avenger comes out in 2011, and it's like, that movie, the tone of that movie is what a Superman movie should feel like.
Yes.
Like, that is the best Superman movie we've seen, and it's not about Superman, but it's just like, that's what you want. And that's the problem is, I remember, like, a lot of times when people try to, like, very adamantly defend this movie, it's like, well, how could you make it, like, about hope or whatever, and about a good person without it being cheesy? And it's like, well, it's not that you make it without it being cheesy, it's just that it's okay if you do it right for it to have moments of things that feel cheesy because they feel earned. And when you watch Captain America, it's like, yeah, he says cheesy stuff or whatever, and sometimes he acts cheesy, but it's like, it feels earned and it feels satisfying. And also, to Dan's point, especially if you're going to grow this into a larger universe, which is clearly their intention, it's good to have Superman as, like, that. You know what I mean? So you can contrast him with other people, and it's nice to have, and especially, like, Dan's talking about not loving Superman, and also, like, I'm definitely a huge Batman head, and I'm not a huge Superman fan, but I think the older I get, the more I've actually started to, like, enjoy Superman content a little bit, because I kind of like the idea of someone who's just a good person, who just, like, is, and, like, has, like, nice stories where everything's okay at the end. I mean, I understand that there's not a lot of, like, crazy potential for, like, wow, gonna punch you in the face storytelling there, but that idea is nice, and I would like to see that done in a modern movie like Captain America, and this movie just doesn't nail that.
But
You know what they should have done?
Sorry, you go, Dan. You have a better point.
Just real quick. You know what they should have done is like, I mean, they never would have done this 'cause it's too expensive, but they should have, because Man of Steel was the first DCEU movie, they should have made it a period piece when Superman was starting to be written in like the 40s or whatever, 30s, 40s, and then they should have made the entire DCEU take place back then.
Dude, oh my god,
that would have actually had a chance to compete, because it would have been different enough.
I would have loved that, because then you can have Batman actually going against like gangsters and stuff.
Yes.
Oh my god, that would have been so awesome.
Yes. So like, don't make it like this first movie is a flashback. Make the entire DCEU, Wonder Woman, Flash, everything in like the golden era of comics.
Yeah, you're right. There you go. That would have easily
Fixed
solved all
it.
their problems.
That would be so interesting.
Damn.
But sorry, what I was going to say is that, obviously, I've said it many times, I'll say it many more. I know nothing about superheroes at all. But when I think of Superman, because everyone knows Superman, like, he seems inherently cheesy to me. Maybe because I don't know, always see pictures of just the logos everywhere. Little children dressed up in the outfit. It's all cute and fluffy, and like, what's the problem with that? Like, as we said, they tried to make this whole universe so dark because of Batman, but like, Batman's dark and earned it, and I just don't understand why they were fighting the cheesiness of Superman so hard. Even when I was like, I didn't do a lot of research because I figured you guys knew everything anyway, but I was reading about even the costume. They're like, oh yeah, Superman usually has like red shorts, but it just didn't fit with this like dark vibe we were going with. And I was like, but why? Like, okay.
But they kept the red boots and the red cape.
Yeah.
Shorts, also, too much.
Oh my god. I mean, on that point too, right? It's just like, since this movie has come out, we've seen other interpretations of Superman on like the CW shows.
Yeah.
That have more comic accurate costumes. Actually, last night they just premiered a new show, like Superman and Lois or whatever.
Oh.
And he wears his costumes from the 1940s in, like, I've seen a still of it. And yeah, I mean, does it look kind of like cheesy? Sure. But also, that's fine. Like, that's okay. He can be that guy. Like, why does he not have to, like, let him be that guy, and I promise it would have worked. And to your point, I think the stuff in this movie that I love, like I said, there's 3 scenes in this movie that I think are David Goyer inventions 100%, because they just reek of like that exact thing we're talking about from Batman Begins, of just nailing it. And all 3 of those scenes don't shy away from just like, having a little bit of cheesiness to it, but like, it's fucking superheroes. Like, it's okay. It can have a little bit, especially Superman. You can lean into the cheesiness. Like, some of the stuff I love the most in comics, like, is the Batman Superman friendship. Like, not even when they're crime fighting or stuff, but just the idea of like Bruce and Clark like having a coffee and just like talking. And it's just some of the most entertaining stuff, because like Bruce is so fucking like OCD dedicated to whatever, and Clark just is a guy with a life who like has a girlfriend and like hangs out, and it's so fun and it's so interesting. And also, we're talking a lot about the movie. Just something I want to point out about, like, that's actually inside the movie. I really like Henry Cavill, and I feel so bad for him because he's never given an opportunity. Like, has such few fucking seconds of time to be the Superman that we want him to be, and every time he has one of those seconds, I feel like he does a really good job of being that guy. And like, I've seen him in interviews and stuff. He's a really personable, cool dude. And I hate that he had to play someone that doesn't feel... I wish he got to actually be Superman. Like, the Superman that we know. Because I think he could have killed it. I think it's so sad that we wasted a perfectly good, like, cast. Like, this guy could have been our generation Superman. He could have been Superman in 10, 15 movies, like a DCEU. And instead, you know,
Isn't he a Bond villain now?
No, he was in Mission Impossible.
Oh, same thing.
He was good in Mission Impossible.
He's great.
Not actually, I'm sorry, like, don't come for me.
In the debate of was it his acting or was it the direction, it's definitely the direction.
Oh my god. Yeah, definitely.
He looked great in the trailer. It all looked great in the trailer.
We should talk about that before we actually get into talking about what happens in the movie.
Can we talk about this? The trailer for this movie is, I think, top 3 best trailers of all time I've ever seen. It is so...
It looked so good.
good. And like I remember being in theaters and seeing that in theaters and being like, guys, like there's no way this movie can't be an A+. Like it is the perfect. But here's the other hilarious thing that I realized when I was watching the trailer this time is that all that you see in the trailer are the 3 scenes that I'm talking about that I really love. Like that's it. It's like it's those 3 scenes, and then the trailer ends. And then I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense why I love the trailer so much.
The trailer also has my favorite shot in the movie, which I genuinely like, which is where young Clark is playing with the red cape.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a nice, like, before I went back and rewatched this last time, I was thinking about that shot in the trailer and the movie. And I was like, you know what, that doesn't really make any sense, because I feel like one thing that really has started to bother me with modern superhero stuff is the use of capes. Because like, in a vacuum, they look kind of dumb.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about, in the MCU, how many of them actually have capes, and it's like Thor, because he's from a royal family, right?
Yeah.
And even later, he kind of abandoned the cape a little bit. And Vision only because of Thor.
Yeah.
And I think that's like pretty much it. And then thinking of how Superman has a cape in this movie, and like, yeah, you're not going to make a Superman movie where he doesn't wear a cape. But I was like, he doesn't really come from like royalty, and he's also the first superhero that we see in this universe, so there's not really a reason for him to have a cape. And that still kind of sits with me a little bit. After I watched the movie, I felt a little better about it, because it's like, all right, I guess Kryptonians just make it a habit of like wearing capes, because a lot of the scenes on Krypton have them wearing capes for some reason.
Yeah. I mean,
but I just wanted to get that out there.
That's the thing. It could just be a fashion thing on Krypton.
I guess.
That's an easy enough explanation. And then, one thing about the scene you're saying, because I also think that's a really beautiful shot, but I also think, and I think this has been pointed out in probably a Red Letter Media review, I don't know, but I think it would be more impactful if it wasn't Clark doing that as a kid. If it was after Superman had showed up, we cut to another kid who saw Superman on TV doing that. Because
it's true, because it doesn't really make sense, because
he
doesn't remember his life on Krypton.
Yeah.
The only thing that I could imagine is that like he has one repressed memory of his father before he got launched as a baby, which is like near impossible, because you don't remember anything when you're a baby.
You don't know about alien races. You don't know how far their memory goes back.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because of the codex.
That is the only maybe.
Yeah.
Also,
maybe.
as a kid, like
reason.
I only knew of capes because of superheroes. Like
That's
the fact
the
that
thing.
royalty wore capes, I wouldn't have known that. So
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe
But
he
also-
just liked how the wind was blowing through it, and it was some weird coincidence. Who knows?
But it was red.
The thing
it's
is,
like so spot
and
on.
the other thing is, it's not even just that it's a red cape; it's that he does the Superman pose. He stands there,
Yeah.
and I was like,
Yeah.
"Why isn't this another kid? Why isn't this a modern kid
Yeah.
who saw?" Remember at the end of the Avengers when they're
Yeah.
doing the news reports, and you cut to that scene where there's all those young kids pretending to be the Avengers. Like, how fucking awesome was that?
Yeah, or at the end of Captain America: The First Avenger, with the kid with the shield, the garbage
Yes.
lid shield. It like that's basically what you're talking about. What they should have done
Yes.
with this movie.
And also, the tone of that is what this should have been, right? Yeah, it's kind of silly and cheesy, but also it's heartwarming. It's like, okay, great. Like, that makes me feel good. Like, that's how this movie should... Instead of this movie ending in, like, a 9/11-esque field of disaster and, like, a snapped head. Like, what the fuck? Like, where did that come from? How was that Superman?
And real quick, you were talking about the Superman pose, the kid doing the Superman pose.
Yeah.
Another Superman pose that I grew to hate this last rewatch is the sticking his arms out while he's flying. I think it looks
Really?
so dumb. Like, I know,
Interesting.
again, that's like a classic Superman thing, but
Yeah.
for some reason on this last rewatch, I like laughed every time that I saw it. And it's also like incredibly non-aerodynamic.
It's not. Yeah,
Maybe
it
it's
doesn't
to
make
keep
any sense.
debris out
I don't
of
know.
his face.
That's what I've always attributed it to. It's just like to keep
Maybe,
shit
but
out of
like
his
he's
face.
Superman. Would it really?
No, I mean,
would
it
really
shouldn't.
hurt
It
him?
shouldn't.
I don't know. That just really bothered me this time.
I'm sure
for
even
some
if you're
reason.
super, getting a fly in your eye or something would suck.
So, but I guess
That's fair.
Actually, there's a scene in Superman Returns where he literally gets shot in the eye, and the bullet just bounces off his eye. It's pretty.
Oh,
That's like the
never mind.
only good scene in that. There's like there's a couple good scenes in that movie. That's one of them.
Never mind, a fly wouldn't do anything. I take
Yeah.
it back.
But I think like what we're talking about here, right? Like, so for example, his flying pose. Like, if this is a movie that leans into the fun and the cheesiness, that would never even be something that would come up. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You would
it wouldn't feel as like out of place.
Yeah, it's but because this movie is trying so hard to be Batman Begins, that when he does if he does something that is comic booky, it feels out of place, which is ridiculous to say, but it's like that's where we're at with this movie because of the direction that it takes.
So do we want to get like into like we started talking a little bit about the plot of the actual movie. Do we want to start like we've kind of been talking about the surrounding environment of the making of the movie?
Yeah.
Do we want to kind of dive into the meat and potatoes now?
Yeah, I mean it's been like an hour. We should probably actually talk about the movie.
Maybe we can actually
because there's a lot that happens in this movie.
There is a lot that happens.
As my summary showed very well, there's a lot that happens.
I don't even know where to start.
First, I really want to just briefly talk about the score.
Yeah.
Because that is another high point. I think we all agree.
Yeah.
That is a high point of this movie. It's Hans Zimmer comes back for another DC score after his run on the Dark Knight trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really good. I like the use of guitar a lot.
Me too.
Strings in general. But just in this conversation we've been having and comparing this to what it could have been with like a Captain America-esque movie, I think as good as the score is in a vacuum, I think for a Superman movie, what would have made it much better is the use of horns. If we were to go for like this sort of golden age style that we've been talking about.
Yeah. The only, I think, reason they didn't is because the John Williams theme is so iconic and that's like all brass. So I think it was an intentional...
Maybe they didn't want to...
Yeah, an intentional choice. But I agree with you. And I actually, like, huge props to Hans Zimmer for making a score that didn't just make me think of the John Williams thing the whole time. Where it was different and it was, like, good enough that I was, like... I was fine with it. You know, I wasn't missing John Williams while I was listening to this because it fit the movie fine. But, yeah.
But that's the thing. As great as Hans Zimmer is, can you imagine if, like, he put so much effort into a score and then everyone was just like, oh, but John Williams did it better. Like, I don't blame him. I would have wanted to do my own thing completely.
Absolutely.
Like, even the greats don't want to be compared to the greats too much.
Yeah.
I'm sure even that is overwhelming.
Well, and I also just think, like, even for him creatively, it's probably, like, cool. So this is, like, a thing that's already been done, like, at the best of its thing. So I need to completely shift gears. Yeah. But I think it's a solid score. And I also think that there's a couple times where it really, like, slaps very hard. And it, like...
Yeah,
and it really hit...
that flight sequence.
Well, yeah, and we can talk about it maybe. Maybe let's get out of the way the stuff that we like about this movie now.
Okay.
And then we'll get into the rest. Because this movie's mostly stuff that makes me scratch my head, except for the stuff that doesn't. So, here's what I like about this movie, okay? There are 3 very Superman things. One of them is the first flight sequence, which I still think is like 10 out of 10. Like every time I watch that sequence, I still get so hyped. It's so great. He comes out of the thing. This is the first time you see him in the suit. It's the first time there's fucking sun in the movie. Like the whole movie has just been like gray, stormy.
It's not overcast.
It's not overcast. He comes out and there's sun and he's like trying to fly. He can't quite get it right. And the whole time Jor-El is giving the speech. And I think it's a really perfect distillation of Superman, the speech that he gives, that you'll be like an ideal of hope for people to strive towards. They'll stumble behind you, they'll fall, but in time they'll join you in the sun. In time you'll help them accomplish wonders. And then he like does the thing, which I also think is cool. It's just a really cool way of showing it, of him like putting his fist against the ground and you see like the ground breaking and then before he shoots
the trailer shot. But it's cool. And I think the score is so perfect there because that's the one time where it feels like fun and like hopeful. And also it's the one time I feel like Henry Cavill gets to have fun as Superman. Yeah, he's smiling
like,
in that scene.
He's like laughing and he's like playing around and like trying to test out his powers, and then at one point he just comes to a full stop and shoots straight up. And I love this because we get the shot from space of him flying like around the camera, which is an homage to like Christopher Reeve. Like at the end of all the Christopher Reeve movies, he would fly into space and come around the camera and then like look at the camera and smile. It was the way that he ended all those movies. It was like cheesy and fun. So we kind of get an homage to that because it's the same camera angle and he comes around. yeah, I just think this whole sequence is like what I wish the tone of this whole movie was. It's fun and hopeful, and I like believe that as a young Superman, and I really enjoy it, and it makes me happy. And again, contextless, like just watching that in a vacuum, I'm like, oh, I love that, and it works so well in the trailer too. It's awesome. The other two are both flashbacks, and they are the ones that I think David Goyer infused, and I think it's the two moments that really hit the same way the Alfred moment with Batman hits, of really understanding like what makes these characters, because like I talked about before, the whole premise of Superman is that it's the fact that he's raised by like the most pure humans on Earth, and the idea that even though he's an alien, to quote Star Trek, like he's the most human out of all of us, you know what I mean, even though he's an alien. And that's because of the way he's raised. And I think we get one flashback with each of his parents that are really good, and then they completely betray those characters later. But the first flashback I really like is when he's starting to discover his powers, and like everything's freaking out, and he goes, like when he's a little kid, and he like runs into the closet at school, and he like locks himself in the closet, and they have to call his mom over. I think that's a really nice moment between him and his mom. And again, I think it establishes like who Superman is really well, because he's like this guy with all these crazy powers or whatever, but at the end of the day, like the lesson his mom is teaching him is like bring it back down to like the human level and just focus on me like as a person. And I think that's like a touching moment between them. And I also think it nails like who Superman is. Like, yeah, there's all this like shit going on and aliens, and he has all these powers, but at the end of the day, it's about like being a person with connections to other people. And then the second one that I think is like perfect is the moment when like his dad shows him that he's an alien. And like there is some weird shit with his dad in this movie, and that's gonna be some of the stuff that I hate, because Pa Kent in this movie does not act like Pa Kent, except in this one scene, which I think is really touching, and it hits that thing of like being kind of cheesy but touching at the same time, where like he finally takes him to show him that he's an alien, and he's telling them all this shit, and yeah, I took this thing to be looked at, and they said it wasn't even on the periodic table, and I guess they didn't ask any other questions after that. I guess they just let me go with an element that's not on the periodic table. But then you get that moment of like Clark being like, can't I just go back to being your son? And Pa Kent being like, no, you are my son. And like he just immediately shuts that down. And again, that to me was like as much of a Superman moment as the why do we fall moment is a Batman moment, where I was like, that's perfect. You've perfectly distilled a like comic book idea into a movie form of, yeah, he's an alien, but at the end of the day, like he's these people's son, and like that's what makes him him. And like in a better movie, in the third act, that would have been the thing that Superman used to like win. You know what I mean? In a better movie, because ultimately this movie is about Superman struggling with being of two worlds, and like that should be the moment that he looks to like find his strength to do whatever he needs to do in the third act, is like remembering that at the end of the day, like, yeah, he's from this other place, but like the moment with his dad, of his dad saying like, no, like everything aside, you are my son, and like I've raised you to be this way and be this person. Anyway, those are my three favorite moments. Those are the three moments that to me make me think, oh my god, this could have been like a great Superman movie. The foundation for a great Superman movie is in here. And then in the third act, we just have an hour of action. It's action, and Superman doesn't learn anything.
And it's dumb action.
He never there's never that moment from The Matrix where he goes, "Oh, there is no spoon." There's no callback to him having the conversation with his dad. There's no callback to him learning a lesson and choosing his humanity. It's just, I mean, there is one scene where he viciously screams, "Krypton had its chance," as he fucking laser eyes a thing open, and then he breaks Zod's neck, and it's just like, oh my god. Anyway, those are my three scenes that I really like in this movie, and everything else is pretty bad. We can talk about it. Do you guys have anything you liked?
So, just looking at this as a movie, as I've said before, I'm just repeating myself a lot here. Superhero movies, not really my thing. But I liked I agree with my high self. I loved the tornado scene as
oh my god.
It was. Maybe because it looked so fun. No, I'm kidding. Someone died. Not anything to joke about. But I did like it. I think the dad was dumb for sacrificing himself just so his son didn't show how super he was. I think I know we're not talking about bad things, so I won't harp on how dumb I think that is. But I liked that scene visually. It was dramatic, but like in a fun way, as opposed to all the just straight up action. So at least there was that human element. I enjoyed it. What else do I like? Henry Cavill looks good. I have a note saying that when he has a beard, I think he looks like the brother from season 2 of You, if anyone watched that.
I didn't. So I can't
check
judge.
it out. And he does look like him. But otherwise, I don't know if I have like good notes. I have like funny moment notes that we can get to.
Yeah, we'll get to
later.
that. We'll definitely
But
get to that.
tornado scene was good. Henry Cavill.
And I want to
good.
talk more about the tornado scene after when we talk about bad things.
Yeah, good. Me too, Dan. Me too.
Yeah, I think that's all I get.
Okay.
For me, the biggest takeaway from this movie is the score. Like, that's number one.
Yeah.
That is because, like, I'll just listen to that score, and I have just on its own. It's really good. But besides that, actual stuff that happens in the movie, as we've mentioned, I do think there was a lot of lost potential with Henry Cavill. I think he could have done a really good job under the right director. And I'd say also with Russell Crowe and Michael Shannon, because Michael Shannon was very interesting on screen.
Yeah.
Because I love Michael Shannon, not in this movie, but like I love his work, and I think he was very wasted. Not like he showed up like his talent was wasted.
Yeah.
I don't know, he might have been.
He did
drunk.
yell a lot. I'll put that out there.
Yeah, but he's just like, he's someone that's I'm always interested to see in a movie on screen. So those 3 cast members in particular, and I'll also give a shout out to Ma and Pa Kent, Diane Lane, and Kevin Costner. But I just want to say, I think everything in the movie, up until Zod, played by Michael Shannon, main villain of the movie, if we didn't make that clear. Actually, I think Carol made that clear in her high summary. Until everything in the movie, up until Zod makes contact with Earth, is like, okay.
Yeah.
It might not be perfect, but it can be repaired.
Yes.
Still. We can still end with a decent Superman movie. And then everything after that, it really starts to snowball downhill for me. Because then that's when the real grittiness starts to consume the movie. Mm-hmm. And you get all of those big, dumb action scenes. You get the Smallville action scene. You get the 2 Metropolis finale action scenes. And it just gets out of control. But everything before that, where it's the flashback origin telling, all of that is before that. And then all of the, pretty much all of like the Christopher Reeve-esque Superman stuff that we've talked about is, I think, all before that. And then all the Krypton stuff is before that. And I like a lot of that stuff.
Me too. I think it's interesting.
And then it takes a turn.
My only problem with it is just how much it plays later into stuff, because I feel like I said, like, I think Superman at its most interesting is about like someone who's choosing to be the best human, and I kind of don't like how much of a sci-fi movie this feels like. At the end of this movie, it feels like fucking Independence Day or War of the Worlds.
By the end,
yeah. And so like at the beginning, like I totally dig that Krypton like prologue. I mean, it goes a little too long, but
it is a little long, but yeah.
I don't mind it. Yeah, it's just like by the time you get to the end and more sci-fi stuff is happening, it's like, I could have done without this. The other thing I'll say, something that you touched on, I think you're totally right. I actually think, and this is why I keep like trying to give David Goyer credit, because this movie structurally is similar to Batman Begins, because we kind of have the first half of Batman Begins is modern day and flashback. We're cutting back and forth, right? Until we have his like Batman moment where he shows up at the docks, beats the shit out of all those guys. Falcone says like, "Who are you?" And then he says, "What the hell are you?" And then Batman like pulls him out of the car and he says, "I'm Batman." And it's like,
and then it's like linear from there on.
And then it's linear. That's like exactly at the halfway point of the movie. the thing with Man of Steel is that it also kind of does this, and except we get to the Superman flying scene. That's like the halfway point, right? He flies. Cool. We're done with the flashbacks. Except there are more flashbacks because at one point Superman goes to a church, sits in the church, has a flashback to a conversation with his dad, comes out of that flashback, then has a conversation with the priest, and it's like, why was there a flashback there? That flashback didn't because the
And you know why else? Sorry, just real quick. You know why else that particular flashback bothered me? Is because all of the flashbacks up until then were him getting increasingly older, and then it goes back to him younger than the previous flashback. It really they should have just left that one.
I had the same thought because we've seen the flashback of Pa Kent dying, and as much as personally I don't love that choice, at least fucking stick to it. You killed this guy. Why are we having a flashback where he's alive again? The dude's dead. That completely different. We shouldn't be getting more lessons from him. I understand it's technically a flashback, so it doesn't matter if it happens in chronological order, but also
but all the other flashbacks were in
and then
order.
That one just backs up the theme that the priest is already talking to him about. So just get rid of that flashback. Why is it in there? I don't know. That one, to me, I think Zack Snyder really had fun with the second half of this movie. I really think where he was like, oh my god, dude, aliens are gonna show up, and then they're gonna fight, and then they're gonna keep fighting, and then they're gonna fight, and buildings are gonna fall, and
it's gonna be so awesome.
It's gonna be so sick.
They fight
yeah,
a lot.
whereas I think the first half of this movie was a bit more
dramatic.
And like you said, not perfect, but good enough to where things would be okay. And actually, before we transition into stuff we don't like, one more thing I want to give a shout out to is just the very end of this movie. Because I remember, lots of weird stuff in this movie, but where it ends, I was like, cool. This is totally open potential. Because where it ends is...
The newspaper?
Yeah, because where it ends is Superman status quo. We have we took a weird road to get there, and kind of dumb shit happened along the way, but we have Superman. He's having a good time, having a conversation with his mom. He's got his job at the newspaper. We have a cool status quo with Lois where he's not going to pretend she doesn't know. They have a relationship clearly, which is, for me, I've always preferred in the comics when Superman knows who Lois is. Sorry, other way around. When Lois knows who Superman is, and they're just dating. Because, like I said, I love the juxtaposition of Superman as the hero that everyone loves, and he's dating the person he loves, and he has a good relationship with his parents. Superman is just the good, idealistic, everything went right in life, and Batman is everything has gone to shit. I love that juxtaposition. And also, not to harp on this, because I know we're going to talk about this next week, but I love, Superman being, from a poor, farmer's family, but because of his humanity and the people he has around him, he has the best life, whereas Batman is from a rich family, but everything is a mess, and everything around him is shit, and his parents are dead, and he has all this money, and there's nothing he can do with it other than just turn it into him beating the shit out of people. I just think that, again, juxtaposition of those characters is cool. And so I like the last scene of this movie. I love, again, Superman's in a good place. We get kind of a fun dialogue scene. Hey, hi Clark, welcome to the planet. Pleasure. It's good to be here, Lois. I was again, cheesy, but also the kind of Superman cheesy that I want. I was aha, that's funny. And then the movie ends, and I think had Batman v Superman been a phenomenal movie, a 10 out of 10, we all love it movie,
we could have forgiven this movie a little
100%, dude. I would have been you know what? Yeah, some weird shit happens, but for the most part, it's fine.
At least it led to a better movie,
yes,
but that's not what happened.
But it didn't. And I think that's the thing that sucks the most, is that this movie comes out in 2013, BVS comes out in 2016. You know what? I'll talk about this side of it next week. I was just going to say, in that time of anticipation, of just, we're finally going to get things, paid off, and it's going to make everything okay. That was just my mindset that whole time, and we didn't. But, yeah.
And I'm usually not one to, say that every movie should stand on its own. So even if this movie, with how it did turn out, even if it did lead to a better movie, it wouldn't be that makes this movie good. But what we're saying, just to be clear, is at least we could have felt better about it, like causing a good movie in this franchise.
Yeah, well, and what I liken it to, and this isn't a perfect analogy because I think the movie I'm about to compare it to is a lot better, but like Age of Ultron, Avengers Age of Ultron, which it's like one of the weaker MCU movies. Yes, it's not great, but I think in context of seeing where Vision has gone on to, where Scarlet Witch has gone on to, also if you guys aren't watching WandaVision, everyone should watch WandaVision. It's so wild. Oh my god.
So good.
But then also like it sets up lots of stuff about the Infinity Stones and like lots of character stuff for Tony, and I don't know, like I just, again, in context of where the MCU goes, that movie ends up, you kind of are able to mentally be a bit more okay with it because the stuff that's in there that is important is what you really latch on to.
And when I watched that movie last time, Age of Ultron, I was like, wow, this movie is crucial for Civil War. It's a great prelude.
Yes, 100%.
To Civil War and everything beyond.
Yep. So, I don't know. That's kind of the last positive thing I have to say about Man of Steel. It's just the ending, even though it doesn't get paid off.
We should talk about the tornado scene now.
Okay.
Because, well, I mean, all I want to talk about with that scene and like sort of everything wrong with Pa Kent. What's his actual
Jonathan Kent.
Jonathan Kent.
Martha Kent.
Everything wrong. Yeah. I remember Martha for sure.
Oh yeah, we all know Martha.
But everything wrong with his character, and it's epitomized in this tornado scene that we keep referencing, is so in this tornado scene. There's just a random, I mean, it's Kansas, but there's a random tornado on the highway they're driving on, and it's like there's a bunch of people on the highway. So Jonathan Kent gets his family and helps other families towards this overpass on the highway to rescue them, and it's a very nice, genuine, it's like this is the person that inspired Superman to be Superman. It's his father doing benevolent things. But the scene ends with him refusing for Clark to go like zoom in and save him. Like he easily could.
Yeah.
He could like go over there real quick and save him, but he refuses because he doesn't want Clark to reveal himself to the world. And I'm guessing, Marco, that's your main problem with him as well, because that's my main problem with Jonathan Kent as well, because this sort of goes against what Clark ends up deciding to do later in the movie. It's like he needs to decide, is he going to hide or is he going to reveal himself? And I think instead of going against what his father told him, it should have been, the movie is him realizing that what his father is telling him is right, and what his father was telling him was to not hold back from who he actually is. But that's not what we get.
Yep.
It's the opposite of that.
Yep. And that's it is something in this movie that is irreparably broken, because it's such a fundamental part of the Superman like mythos. I mean, it would be like a Batman movie where Batman's parents don't die. It's like it's so broken that it's just like, I don't understand why Superman is the way he is, because again, in those earlier scenes, like the scene with his mom, the first scene with Jonathan where he's like, no, you're still my son, it's like I do see like that kid going on to be Superman. But then again, like as I guess their relationship goes on and it gets paid off, it ends in such a weird place. And it's frustrating to me. And like something I was thinking about on this most recent rewatch, how cool would it have been, or not how cool, but like if you wanted to do this but do it in a way that is more Superman, if like we get the flashback and like Clark doesn't necessarily tell Lois what actually was the result of that day. You know what I mean? We don't see the dad get swept up by the tornado. We just see him be like, stop. And then we cut back to Clark talking to Lois in the grave. I guess it couldn't have been in the graveyard. But Clark talking to Lois somewhere because she's discovered who he is. And him being like, yeah, like I still struggle with like what I'm supposed to do or whatever. But then, again, like in the third act or something, we see that flashback again, but it turns out that he actually did save his dad. You know what I mean? And like, he is like that person, and he is that good person. Like, because also, and I'm so sick because in the comics and all the animated stuff, like his parents are like alive, and he has a relationship with them, and it's so frustrating.
Ask.
Yeah, not every superhero needs to lose their parents.
And in fact,
or one of their parents.
It's so important to me anyway that Superman doesn't come from tragedy, because that's not who he is, and that's not what he's about. And like, the more that he comes from tragedy, the more he turns into Batman. And that's, again, we'll see next week. It's like, if you have someone who's already basically Batman, what the fuck is the point of having him pair up with Batman?
Yeah.
Like, and it's so important to me that Superman comes from a good place and Batman comes from tragedy. And so this scene, yeah, it's one of those things where I remember the first time seeing it, it feels emotional. Like, the first time you watch it, you're like, oh no, like, Pa Kent, wow, how touching. But then as you like think about it and think about like who Superman is and what the scene means, you're like, that doesn't make sense, like, for what the movie's, or not, I guess what the movie's about, but what the movie should be about, like what a Superman story should be about. It just, it's so like antithetical to that, and yeah, it's frustrating.
But you know how else you could have done it if you wanted to keep it so that Jonathan Kent dies?
Yeah.
You could have used these flashbacks to tell the story of Clark being hesitant to reveal himself because he's like self-conscious or whatever reason, and like switch their roles, basically have John trying to convince him to be who he is, and then when it comes time for that scene, he's like, this is your chance, you need to help these people, but he's hesitant, and he lets his father die as he's like, his father is saving all these people, like a perfect display of what Superman should be. And that is his, like, that's a turning point.
That
for him to start being a benevolent hero.
That's perfect. Yeah, that also.
Even if you wanted to keep it so that he dies, and I agree with you, like, it would probably be better if he just wasn't dead at all. But if you wanted to keep that would have been a perfectly serviceable way to repair it.
As far as I know, really the only place his dad's ever died was actually Superman the movie, like the original Chris Reeves Superman the movie. But what's actually interesting about that is they have his death be, again, like you're saying, Dan, a turning point, because his dad just collapses and dies of a heart attack. And there's this like really touching moment where Superman is like with Martha, like at the burial, and he's like, man, like, I have all these powers and I still couldn't save him. Like, I have all these amazing gifts and there was nothing I could do. And like, spoiler alert, I'm not even going to spoil it, but that ends up being the theme of like Superman Returns in a lot of ways. Like, as you get into the third act, is that like Clark has to deal with the fact that even though he has all these powers, like, he can't save everyone because he's just a person. He's just a human. You know what I mean? Like, he's not a god, which again is like what a Superman movie should be, is like him having to deal with that. So yeah, and this one is just, it's like, it's not even just that he dies, because you can do him dying and do it well. It's what you're saying, Dan. It's like the method by which he dies is so dumb, because his dad should be the one telling him to like be a good person and use his gifts for good. So yeah, it's kind of silly.
And you know what I was like, something that just came to mind too is, I guess it's not really necessarily jarring that Superman has a father who dies, because after all, his real parents are still, like, they die. Like, that straight up happens in like every Superman story. So I guess one more parent isn't really
I guess.
I'm sure he isn't thinking that way.
He's like, what's one more?
So are we done with talking about positives?
Oh yeah, no, we're firmly.
I am, at least.
Okay, so I just wanted to say, my biggest issue with this movie as a whole is that they did a really horrible job of towing the line between, it's Superman, everyone gets it, and we need to explain it for those who know nothing about Superman.
Yeah.
So as a person who was in the knowing, I guess, middle ground of knowing stuff about Superman, I'm not clueless, but like I know he's from Krypton, I know about the suit, blah, blah, blah. So I just kept being so confused, because they'd go into depth about some of the most unnecessary information, like on Krypton, when they showed how like the babies were born in the sacks. I don't know what the heck that was all about. I don't know why that was important.
Stupid sci-fi stuff.
And like and even just it started with him like being born normally, so you just assume that's the norm, and then they allude to how he's the first one born in hundreds of years who's that naturally, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, so they just like went into depth about things that were so meaningless and just very much like sci-fi and like alien-esque, and I'm like, okay, cool, who cares? But then when it came to actually important parts of Superman and his backstory, they just skimmed over it completely. Like, even when they first showed him as an adult on Earth, because I went back through my notes and it does look like it was the whole Krypton thing and then he was on the oil rig or whatever. I thought genuinely he was just traveling in space for so long that he arrived as an adult. And then they went to a flashback and I was like, wait, so he didn't arrive as an adult? I am so confused. And so for people who like are in the middle ground like me, and okay, I know he was sent to Earth. When did he arrive here? I don't really know. I was like, okay, he's an adult. He arrived as an adult and he went straight to an oil rig to save people. Sure. Like, obviously that was explained pretty quickly, but just it was jarring to then have all the flashbacks, because I was like, I guess I kind of know the story, but we're all around and I don't really know the story. And also the Lois Superman relationship didn't make sense to me either. I think that's why I also in general had an issue with them trying to do the origin plus this big battle. I think anyone could, like a lot of other people could have done it well. Maybe just the way this was structured wasn't, because they didn't have enough time to dedicate to each part, or maybe just the jumping around of it, or the way they did it didn't allow enough detail in every segment. And so like the Lois Superman relationship, I feel like gets no time and no fleshing out. Just all of a sudden they're like looking at each other intensely and like care about each other and if they die or not. And I'm like, where's this from? He like, okay, saved your life, I guess, but you don't actually know that much about him to be like in love and wanting to save him. And I don't know, it was just a lot. As a movie, I didn't care enough about any aspect of it because it was just jumping around everywhere and it was all confusion, and that's all my notes say. It's just so many question marks. If you could see.
I bet.
Yeah.
I understand. So a couple things you touched on. And to what I think Dan and I were kind of alluding to a little bit earlier. The sci-fi stuff in this movie is so frustratingly out of place. We did not need this complex of a sci-fi plot. No. And like to your point, something else you're saying, Carol, is like how much there is in this movie. Really, when you look at kind of the classic Superman movies, this is a combination of Superman 1 and 2. Superman 1 is his origin, Superman 2 is him fighting Zod. And this movie kind of takes those and does them both in one. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If, again, like Dan and I are saying, the Batman Begins structure, if you do the first half of the movie up until his first flight being the origin stuff, and then the second half of the movie being a fight with an antagonist, great. And also, context-wise, they definitely had to have him fight Zod, because one of the biggest complaints about Superman Returns was that he doesn't throw a punch in that movie. He just kind of flies around and is sad, and then lifts a rock, and then almost dies but doesn't, and then has a kid that he doesn't know about. So, I understand why that choice.
Kryptonians and humans should not be able to.
No, I mean that's a whole other.
Like, they should not be compatible.
Yeah, of course not. Of course not. That's a whole other thing. But I think the problem is they overcomplicate the sci-fi stuff so much that it, like you're saying, doesn't give room for any of the character stuff to breathe. And then. I think that's just fundamentally like the problem with the structure, with everything. Okay, Dan, I gotta ask you, and then we'll turn it over to Carol, and we'll let her have the final word on this. Is it just me, or is Lois Lane a caricature in this movie? Because
okay, I'm really glad you asked, because I wanted to say Lois's character is so weak in this.
Oh my god,
and she is just there for like servicing plot elements.
Yes.
And, like, okay, biggest example, there is, like, within the logic of the script, there is zero reason for her to be on Zod's ship. Zero reason. Not even, like, they didn't even try to come up with a bullshit reason.
I noticed that this time around, right?
Zod doesn't even know who she is. She doesn't even know that, sorry if I'm yelling.
No, you're
she
good.
Doesn't even know, or sorry, not she. Zod doesn't even know that she knew who Clark was.
Yeah.
So there was zero reason.
No, and like you said, they don't try to explain it. Superman surrenders himself, and then Feora says, also, Zod wants you. And then Lois is like, okay, I guess I have to go. And then
it's just so that
never explained.
so that she can talk to Zor-El.
Yeah.
And like his consciousness on the ship, so that she knows how to stop them in the end.
Yeah.
But they don't even try. They don't even make an attempt to patch that together, like within the logic of the universe of the movie.
Yeah.
And that bothered me so much. There's so much dumb shit in this
absolutely,
movie.
I totally agree. And then the other problem I have with Lois about her being kind of a caricature is, and Carol, like, you can either back me up or disagree with me on this as the woman on the podcast. It's up to you.
You can either back me up or agree with me.
Yeah, you can do one of those two. But what I'm going to say is that this, to me, feels like trying to write an empowered, strong female character without actually giving a shit. Because the extent of... So, like, for context, for people who don't know, Lois Lane is, like, the quintessential, simultaneously, yes, damsel in distress. Like, obviously, back in the day, she was a prop for Superman to save in the 1940s. 100%. No argument there. But as her character has gone on over time, she has also become way more of like a gutsy, ballsy reporter person. Okay? And like she's always putting her career first, and then and in most good Superman stories, even the fucking Superman movie from the 1970s, you see her like be a gutsy, ballsy reporter who is putting herself in danger like for the sake of her job to like be this person. And in this movie, she doesn't really do that. We just kind of talk about how she does that. Like, I noticed this, like, her introduction in this movie is abhorrent. It is, like, the worst screenwriting I've ever seen. She comes off of this helicopter, and her and this guy are walking towards camera, and they just exposit that Lois Lane is a strong female character. The guy's like, you know, Miss Lane, I think it's pretty cool that you were...
He's like, I think you're a strong female.
Yeah, he's like, you know, it's cool how you were in the military and getting the story, and also you're a strong female character. And she's like, what can I say if I'm not getting shot at? Then and then there's like another scene. The scene immediately after that, she like goes to meet up with the general. And fucking Toby from
General
West Wing
Zod.
is there for some reason. I don't know why Toby's in this movie. But anyway, like, they meet up with the general, and then they're, like, arguing about something, and then Lois Lane says, okay, well, if we're done measuring dicks, then maybe can I, like, go do this thing? And I was like, oh my fuck. Like, it's so, like, it stands out so much to me that they don't have her do anything to be a strong female character. They just have her talk about how she's a strong female character, or have people around her talk about how she's a strong... It's like the first rule of screenwriting, and they just broke it. Like, they did not give a shit. They were like, yeah, we don't know how to show Lois being strong, so she's gonna get saved by Superman, and we're gonna talk about how cool she is, but she's never actually gonna do something that shows who she is as a character. And also, I love Amy Adams. She's horribly miscast in this role. This is like awful casting, I feel like. I know she's an Academy Award-winning actress. I love her. I genuinely love her. I think she's great. Horrible. It's like horrible writing, horrible casting, horrible directing, and this is just the worst interpretation of Lois Lane I've ever seen in my life.
That was going to be my first response to your comment, was that I don't know if my feelings about Lois Lane were because I don't know how I feel about Amy Adams in the role, but I don't know. I feel weird about her in general. Like, obviously, she's a great actress, but I just always see her as the singing princess in Enchanted or whatever that movie is. Yeah. And so anything that strays too far from that kind of character feels weird to me. So in this dark world, that just didn't really seem right. And so I wasn't sure how much of it was that I don't really think Amy Adams was great. Like, this role was not made for her, let's be honest.
No.
But I wasn't sure how much of it was that versus how much they didn't allow the character to be fleshed out, because as you mentioned, it just seemed like they just tossed in random phrases that made her seem like a strong character. Like, yes. I'll print this story or I'll walk. Like, okay, good for you. Like, I get it. You're a big name or whatever, or you think you are, because that didn't mean anything. They didn't print the story anyway. Yeah.
No, but Carol, they kept saying multiple times that she's a Pulitzer Prize winning
this is my
writer.
Biggest pet peeve. This is my biggest pet peeve, is that, like, if you want to show someone in a movie or TV show is good at journalism, you bet your ass they have won every Pulitzer Prize that's ever been given out. You know what I mean? That is just, it's the only way writers know how to show that. So, yeah, she's talking to Perry, And she's like, hey, I really want to do this. And Perry is like, Lois, as you know, you're a Pulitzer Prize winning author, which means, and I'm like,
Act
for
like
fuck's sakes, guys, is this actually happening right now?
Yeah, but so I think it was tough. Definitely, they didn't really treat her like a human character. They were just like, she's in this movie because it's Superman and Lois Lane is Superman's, girl. She has to be here. But I feel like, I don't know if in the writer's room, they're just like, we don't really care about her. Just toss her in. She'll be nice on screen and say her words. Just none of it tracked. Like, I guess it's hard to really critique it in this film in particular because like just a lot of it in general didn't track, and I have a lot of similar complaints about the male characters too. Sure. But at least there was like, I guess, more context there and more screen time given, so even if there wasn't the context, at least there was more time for people to kind of piece things together contextually from background work. I don't know, but just with her, none of it tracked. And it was annoying, and I didn't like it and get it.
Yeah.
And
I think it, like most of it is because of how Zack Snyder views women in his movies, and I think once we get to Justice League, that'll be heavily apparent.
Yes, very much so.
Can't wait.
Yeah. I think the only thing Zack Snyder is less interested in than Superman is women in movies. I think that's probably fair enough to say. Yeah, it's frustrating. Like, I don't know. It's extra frustrating that if you go watch the 1978 Superman movie, they not just like nail the character of Lois, but it feels like an actual strong female character that like a modern sensibility. And that movie is like from 1978, and it's like,
this is such a step back.
How have we regressed this badly in the way we're writing this character? Like, I don't get it.
Hey, I think we should consider it a step forward for feminism that she was requested to be on the alien spaceship. Yeah. Back in the day, the aliens wouldn't have wanted her there, but women are important now. They're equals.
Yeah. Random women that they don't even know who they are.
That was very funny. I also had many questions as to why she was needed and why no one questioned that she was needed.
What else do we not like about this movie?
I mean, we're already an hour and a half in. I don't know if we can get through our whole list.
Well, we definitely we got to talk about the finale, but we should, if there's other stuff we want to say first, we should save that.
Let me take it back to the beginning.
Ooh.
The first frames of this movie is just why is there so much shaky cam in this movie? The movie starts.
Oh my god.
And it's a council scene, and the camera is fucking bouncing around like it's on the back of a dog or something. It's just like I was like getting dizzy. I was like, guys, just put the camera down. Why is it shaking?
Okay, there's that, and there's like 50 fucking snap zooms in this movie.
That's the
They're
other
so
thing.
fucking annoying. I hated those.
At one point,
in the first 15 minutes, there's like 10 of them on its own.
When the ship is leaving Krypton, there's a snap zoom. Then as it like comes to Earth, there's like 2 snap zooms. Like we go from a snap zoom into a snap zoom, and I was like, Zach, buddy, like you need to do something else.
At one point on Krypton, there's like 2 consecutively in the same shot.
Yeah.
It's just so annoying.
For context, by the listeners who may not know, obviously shaky cam, what we're just talking about is like when the frame is literally moving, and a lot of times you'll see it in kinetic like action scenes. A lot of directors will use it where like you're supposed to feel like so if you think about the first action scene in Batman Begins where Batman drops down and he's like fucking up all those guys, there's some shaky cam there because the idea is like you're supposed to be a little bit disoriented.
It's typically used when you're filming something like grittier.
Yes, like Twilight.
To generalize.
Twilight, yeah. But Zack Snyder uses it way too much, and he uses it literally at the opening frames of this movie when we're just listening to a council discussion. Like, I would understand if it was like started steady and then when Zod bursts into the room we moved to shaky cam, but no, it's literally just shaky cam from the beginning, which I don't know.
See, what you just said would have been a stylistic decision.
Yeah, that's the thing.
In cinematography, of starting it on a tripod or whatever, and then switching to a different style because the scene is changing somehow.
Because Zod is chaotic, you know what I mean? He's disrupting the room. That would be filmmaking, I think.
Yeah.
And then the snap zooms, and I think this one, like, I think everyone has seen. You may just not know what we're talking about, but it's the thing where, like, you'll like focus onto something, and then you'll do like a virtual zoom into that thing, and it happens all the time. It happens all the time in this movie. And it's
so many times.
like, again, it's a stylistic thing that you can use if, like, after you focused on something, you really want to, like, pinpoint. But it's so overused in this movie. It's ridiculous.
And Zack Snyder, he does not show restraint with snap zooms, with the shaky cam, with slow motion in a lot of his... In Watchmen, for example. Yeah. It's just, he has no restraint. He likes something, he thinks it looks cool, and he just uses it to all hell.
Okay, so speaking of looking cool, something that doesn't look cool, and I don't know how this happened. What's with the space dildos? What's with the dildos flying into the Phantom Zone?
Oh, you're talking about when they freeze Zod?
Yeah. Like, how did that how did that get through production design, but then also make it into the final cut of the movie? I don't get it.
Yeah. 100% agree.
Yeah.
But you know what else? You know what else I hate about the look of this movie? It just, all of it. It looks so fake.
Yeah.
Even stuff that didn't need to be CGI was clearly CGI.
Oh yeah, 100%.
All throughout the movie.
This is a problem I have with a lot of Zack Snyder stuff. Like, is that everything has this like sheen of it. You don't feel like you're there.
Artificial.
Yeah, it all feels artificial.
Artificial.
Yeah, I don't. It's incredibly frustrating. You're right. It's just.
And some of the CGI wasn't even like particularly good.
No.
Like there's some bad CGI in this too.
Probably to save time.
Very jarring.
The ending fight, most likely.
And also like a lot of the Krypton CGI.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those animals.
Oof. Also, yeah, what was up with them? Why did we need to see those animals, guys? Like, we could have just not seen any of that.
Yeah.
I
gave me the, you know, I talked before about the Krypton part being in the segment of the movie that I could forgive it if the rest of the movie got better, and I still stand by that. But on the topic of the Krypton part, a lot of the details give me Star Wars prequels flashbacks.
I could feel that, yeah.
Useless George Lucas details that he clearly cares about, but do not belong in the movie.
And that's the thing, when they were doing like the making of like stuff that I was watching, it's like, yeah, like we hired a linguist to come up with a language for all these inscriptions on the people's fucking hats, and I'm like,
I don't even remember seeing that in the movie.
Yeah, I'm like, what? Like, no one knows that that's
they
there.
They speak English.
Like, who cares? What?
You know what else is funny is when Zod first starts making contact with all of Earth, and he's like translating into all the languages around Earth, but he's just speaking. They speak English, of course. Kryptonians speak English. I just found that really funny and stupid.
I thought there was something, if you're gonna lean into the sci-fi, which I don't think you should, there was something interesting they could have done that they didn't, because
I think I know what you're going to talk about, and I think we've talked about this before.
When Clark finds, when the archaeologists or whatever they are in the Arctic find that spaceship from Krypton, right?
Yeah.
And then Clark goes to it, and then his dad explains that this was like a scout ship that we sent when we used to explore. I thought that we were going to explain Kryptonians looking like humans and speaking fucking human language by the idea that Kryptonians were actually the first settlers on Earth. That's where life on Earth came from, was Kryptonians.
That would have explained so much.
But like over time, like because of evolution, they lost their powers. You know what I mean? Because they got used to whatever, the atmosphere, whatever, fuck it. What, like in a movie that...
Or even...
Yeah.
Well, actually no, yours would have made more sense. But even like something that would have been better than the reality of the movie we got is there were humanoid creatures on Earth already, and then Kryptonians came and then like like mingled and like bred. Even that would have been more of an explanation to why we can understand each other and look kind of the same.
But apparently we look the same and can understand each other, and also there's a spaceship on Earth, and those things have nothing to do with each other. It's just there for some reason. And I was like, I remember I specifically remember watching this movie for the first time, seeing that scene and being like, oh, I think I figured it out. And then the movie ended and I was like, I guess they just didn't want to do anything with it? I don't know.
I read about the open pod on the spaceship is supposed to just be like a nod to like Supergirl or another super being, like it's an Easter egg or something. And then, but that the real reason that ship is there is just so that Zod can go to it at the end, so that when his people are sucked into the black hole, he can remain to have a really cool looking but dumb schlocky fight with Superman that destroys Metropolis.
Do we want to talk about the action in this movie? Are we there?
I think let's start talking about the action. Yeah.
So before we get into it, I need to preface this by saying one thing, okay? Like I mentioned, the only live action Superman we had seen to this point is the 1970s movies, where the fighting is the worst part. It looks awful. It looks stupid. Just as stupid as you would think it would look, okay? We see Superman Returns, where there's not one action scene. There's not one punch thrown. There's nothing. The TV shows that we're seeing now on the CW obviously came after this movie, and also the special effects still look like shit. So this was their first opportunity to do a modern Superman movie with a modern special effects ability to like show a fight between two Kryptonians, right? And for me, when we first get that fight in Smallville, I was so on board. I was like, oh my god, this looks so cool. Like, as someone who grew up watching the TV show Smallville for whatever 11 seasons it was on, and seeing them have to like do these shitty effects and like kind of show fighting but not really or whatever, it was like, I thought it was so satisfying for like those first 10 minutes of like him fighting the Kryptonians. I was like, oh wow, like this looks so good, and like the effects are cool and the choreography's cool, love it. And then it kept going, and then it kept going, and then it kept going, and then they get to Metropolis, and then, I mean, just the worst destruction you have seen in your life happens, and then Superman and Lois like make out. Like, they're on ground zero of like
it's a wasteland.
A wasteland of dead bodies and just dust, and Superman and Lois are like making out, and then Zod shows up, and Superman's like, hey, hang on, I have to go fight this guy. And then they like destroy more buildings, and they fight more. And then he snaps his neck. And then, but like, that's the thing is that, and maybe we can talk about the next snap as like the last thing, but with all this fighting and all this cool shit that you're doing, you literally, your solution to the final fight of the movie was for him to snap his neck. That was how it ended. Like, the problem for me isn't that Superman kills Zod. Like, I'm okay with, in Superman's first outing, he kills the guy, and then that's where he, like, kind of gets his morality about not killing from. Cool. That's, like, no, I don't think there's any Superman fan that would really, like, say that's a problem, per se. The problem is that it's so stupid. It's like, we've seen all this crazy shit, and you're telling me in this one scenario there was nothing left for him to do but snap his neck? Like, come the fuck on. Anyway, what's your guys' take on the action?
I don't know. In general, it was just a long action sequence, and I couldn't care less. But my whole thing is that when it started, and General Zod, there was that moment where he was, like, being overwhelmed by all the noise and the senses and the traffic, and I was like, okay, fine, like, checks out, whatever, the reverse happened to Superman in the spaceship, sure, who cares? But then, like, 2 seconds later, but in a very short amount of time, he was then like flying around like nothing happened, and I'm like, you really got used to it that fast? They're just gonna pretend like that was such a big deal for those few seconds, and then it's just over unless I like missed an explanation.
And it took Clark all his life to get used to that. It took Zod like an hour.
How much better would it have been if that was what Clark used to beat Zod?
Right?
Like,
it checked out, but then they just like, erased it.
No, they just gave up. They were like, nah, you should just kill him in another way. It was like, that would be so cool if that was the thing. See, but that
interested me, because I was like, okay, that checks out. Like, he had to grow up with this, and it was his entire childhood to get used to it and learned how to control it. And this evil guy who technically just came out of, because being trapped in a dildo, so it should be even more overwhelming for him.
Oh my god, I know. Tell me about it.
Over in an hour.
He shouldn't be able to walk.
Yeah. Well, and it's just like, again, like to back up, if you wanted to back up the theme of like a good Superman movie, like Superman like is able to control his powers because of like his time on Earth and his humanity, and like Zod doesn't have that, which
is very anti
which is ultimately his downfall. You know? Like, that would be what a movie would do.
Yeah.
But in this one, he just like,
it's called theming.
He just like waits for a second and then is fine. And then they just fight, and I don't know.
Also, I have a shout out to one part I actually liked, kind of just because I thought it was hilarious. That one girl from the newspaper, remember when she was trapped
Yeah.
And then the boss and
Yeah.
the other employee were ready to like leave her because they couldn't get her out, and they just accepted everyone's death, and then it all ended at the last second and they were all happy. That was good. That was cheesy and I liked it. I thought it was funny.
Me too.
If the whole movie had that kind of vibe, I'd be in.
See, I like that because, again, it has that, level of, like, sweet, cheesy of, like,
Yeah.
they're just all sitting there holding hands like the toys in fucking Toy Story 3. I'm like, like, no one would do this in real life, but, like...
And they were saved by an alien.
And they were saved by an
it's
alien,
so
yeah. Like, I'm totally fine with that. But, again, in this movie where nobody acts like that, it's kind of weird when they act like that, but also, also...
And they should have been shown more.
Why was that? Yeah, I was just gonna
like
say,
we
like,
care about this woman whose name we don't know, probably.
Exactly.
I know Perry White because Perry
Yeah.
White is a famous Superman character,
Yeah.
and he's played by Lawrence Fishburne.
Yes, of course.
I don't care, like who was that other person?
There were two other people that
Yeah,
I don't know who they were.
They
Beats
worked
me.
at the paper. That's all I know.
You know what would have been better is if, like, at the halfway point of this movie, like after Superman becomes Superman, he gets his job at the paper, and like we establish a relationship with those
You
characters.
get to know them a little
Yeah.
bit more, yeah.
And then they're in jeopardy.
That's a good idea.
And then, oh my god, what if, like, they're in jeopardy, but then, like, Superman directly saves them somehow, and then you have, like, a fun moment where they don't recognize that it's Clark or whatever, and, like, that would have been cool. That would have been like something a Superman movie would do.
Not dark enough.
Yeah, like I feel like this movie, besides all the flashbacks, if we're talking about the linear parts after the origin is done being told, like the second half of the movie, it all takes place way too consecutively.
Yeah.
Like it's literally it's one thing after another.
Yeah, you're right. It really
And
is.
it feels like it's all in an afternoon.
It does. That's why I was
For all
so
this to be
surprised that
happening.
he what's acclimated. That's the word I was looking for. Acclimated so quickly.
Yeah. Oh, Zod, you mean?
Yeah.
So this reminds me
Yeah.
of something. So I think the counter argument to that, which I don't buy, I think it's stupid, would just be that
Okay.
like because like his purpose on Krypton was that he was bred as like a warrior, that maybe it's easier for him. That's dumb and it's not really like set up. But it did remind me of one thing, just since we're talking about the action, is I don't know why Jor-El at the start of this movie is like an action god, because he's bred to be a scientist, right? Like they're all bred for something. This dude is bred to be a scientist, and he literally like fucks up 6 different like Kryptonian security people, like with his
Yeah.
ninja karate moves. And I'm like, why do you have these skills? This is such a dumb thing of like, okay, if you really want to stick to the idea of people being bred for different purposes, and then Clark being, which by the way, none of this is like canon. Like, none of this had to be this way. There are plenty of Superman stories where it's not this way. But the only reason they did it this way is so that way Superman can be more of a fucking Jesus figure. Because God help us if we can tell a Superman story without having to have him literally fall backwards as if he's on a cross. Like,
Yeah. And he's 33 years
and
old.
he's 33 years, I'm 33 years old, General. Like, oh, shut up. Like,
And he has a beard at the beginning. Looks like Jesus when he's in the water with like the
Oh my God,
like
dude.
the rags.
what if like, oh my God, that's amazing. I didn't even realize that.
Also, is it Jor-El?
Yeah.
His father's name? I keep calling him Zor-El.
I'm
for
sure
some reason.
Zor-El.
Is that another?
Yeah, it must be another character. It
You think
must
everyone's
be
name starts with Z?
something fun I want to point out for you guys now that the Snyder Cut is coming out
Okay.
is, do you know that the General Swanwick,
Yeah.
he is the black military general? Okay.
Yeah.
He is apparently the Martian Manhunter in Justice League.
Like the guy playing him,
Yeah.
or
No,
the
he's
character.
the character, the Martian Manhunter, throughout all these movies. So, for those of you who don't know, Martian Manhunter is a member of the Justice League. He is he is an alien. So, there used to be a species on Mars. This alien race came and killed everyone. He's the last surviving alien on Mars.
So in
Okay.
this film, this character is an alien?
He's
Technically?
well, maybe. So let me
Okay.
get to it. So in general, in like comics, that's who the Martian Manhunter is. He is like this alien, last surviving alien on Mars. He basically has all the powers of Superman. He can fly. He has super strength, but he also can shapeshift. He's a really cool character. Like they do cool stuff with him in the animated Justice League show. So, after this movie came out, General Swanwick was in it, and people were like, okay, that's cool. And then General Swanwick shows up again in Batman vs Superman. Spoiler alert.
Does he?
Yeah, he is. And people online did what people online do. They were like, oh, because Martian Manhunter is normally a black guy when he's in his human form. So they were like, oh, here's like a single black character in these movies. Maybe he's the Martian Manhunter. And then, like, now Zack Snyder is saying that yes, he is, and in the Snyder cut, he's going to be the Martian Manhunter. Oh. So let me say, I don't know if Zack really truly always planned to turn him into the Martian Manhunter. And when we talk about the Snyder cut, we'll talk about. Believe me, we are going to talk about what's actually gonna be what it was supposed to be versus what Zack is retroactively fucking with because he knows it's what people want.
Can't wait.
But one way or another, apparently it is now canon that this guy is also an alien, and during the literal end of the fucking world, he did nothing for some reason.
Yeah, that's why I do not think that Zack Snyder planned for this at all. Of course not. Because he also didn't plan for... I mean, we'll definitely talk about this in the next episode, but he did not plan for the backlash of the end fight in this movie, and then he retroactively wrote that into Batman v Superman and how that affected people. So that's just another example of how clueless he seems to be. So I predict that he absolutely did not intend for that and just kind of jumped on board.
I'm 100% with you. And I can't wait to see what happens in Justice League. But yeah.
Oh, you know what else? I should have talked about this when we were in the positives segment. But one other thing I kind of liked, it's just a minor thing, but I liked towards the end when they decide to use the capsule that Clark arrives on Earth in as like sort of a missile. They like drop it from the plane, but they don't end up doing that, and they sort of instead dive bomb the plane into the Kryptonian ship as the last resort. That was kind of fun.
I did too. I thought that was an interesting like story thing that they decided to do.
I found one other positive in my notes. I like how his bully ended up working at IHOP.
Yeah. Me too. Also, yeah, that's kind of funny because in Smallville and the TV show Smallville, Pete Ross is like his best friend, and he's also a black guy. And in this movie, he's like a white guy who is a bully who then I guess kind of becomes his friend. I don't know. It's just weird because he was like such an iconic character in Smallville, which like wasn't that long ago. It was like from the 2000s. So to like change that up in this way, and man, when we get to Batman v Superman, let me tell you about Zack Snyder fucking with characters from Superman for no reason. Let me tell you, there's a character that he fucked with. You guys don't even know he fucked with because it's so.
I think I know.
I think Dan knows because I told him about it. But like. Yeah. If you didn't know to look for it, you wouldn't know he fucked with it.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah.
Something for me to search for when I rewatch.
Sure. That scene always felt kind of weird. I was watching a YouTube video one time, and someone like pitched like how that scene would have been done better, or like how it would have been done in a Marvel movie, and I was like, yeah, you're totally right.
Sorry, which scene?
Oh, the Pete Ross scene. Sorry.
Like when he was a kid?
No, when they were at the IHOP at the end.
Oh.
So like Superman crashes through the IHOP, and he's like stumbles for a second, and he gets up and he sees Pete, right? And then they like have a look, and then someone else comes in and hits Superman. And someone was like, man, like wouldn't it have been so much better if they had a moment where Clark was just like, oh hey Pete, what's up? And then like someone else came and like took him, and it was like that's such a Marvel movie thing to do, but then also like a Superman like cheesy silly thing of him just being like, oh hey, like how's it going? And then like immediate like it just would have broken the tension there, but instead they just stand there like fucking staring at each other, like death staring.
Well, the thing is though, Clark wouldn't recognize him.
But like we don't know when their relationship ended. Is I get like
oh yeah,
you
know
what I mean? Like maybe they went to high school together, and
like
Clark
maybe they
definitely
went to college.
Looked like Clark in high school.
Actually, Clark did go to college.
Yeah, oh man, yeah, that's definitely But I mean, like it could have been like just a cute, fun moment.
That's fair, yeah.
One positive that I had that I wanted to say, I just think the sound design is really good. Where when he's like with the guy at the bar is fucking with him, and then like he goes to shove him, and he like bounces off of Clark, and you literally hear like a steel sound effect, like cause he's like, I love that sound design
because he's the man.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's cool. That's like a fun thing, and also I just think that the way that's shot of him like hitting off him is just like funny.
I like that scene a lot in general too, like when he fucking destroys his truck on a telephone wire like afterwards. But it's also kind of dumb because it's like, did he do that in broad daylight? Like, he's so against showing who he is, and it's just out in the open. But whatever, it was fun. It was a fun scene in this movie, and those are kind of scarce.
I agree. I like when he comes out of the water and he's shirtless and he's super jacked, and then there's a Chris Cornell song playing for some reason. Listen, I love Chris Cornell. I adore Chris Cornell. R.I.P. Chris Cornell.
Yes. R.I.P.
I don't know why there's a random Chris Cornell song in this movie for some... Like, it's all score except for that one song.
Well, there's also, in that bar scene we were talking about, someone singing a cover of Ring of Fire,
Do you want to hear a funny story about this? This is on the special features.
Oh, no.
That girl is just like a friend of Zack Snyder's, who Zack Snyder
who could sing.
Yeah, who Zack Snyder like tries to get into his movies. Like anytime he's doing.
Oh, she's like the Stan Lee cameo.
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah. Except she's like a failed musical artist.
Except no one knows.
Yeah, exactly.
To look for. That's kind of funny.
That's pretty funny.
Well, at least it's a woman that he's helping out, I guess.
That's
Getting her
true. Yeah,
paycheck.
instead of an old white guy.
Yeah. I mean, the weird thing is though, like, Zach has like apparently a good relationship with his wife, who's like a producer on all these movies, and is also like an actual strong, independent woman in real life. So I don't know why there is like such a lack of those type of characters when he's clearly around someone who is, or also like, why does his wife not point these things out to him? Or maybe she does, and maybe he's just a dick. I don't know like how that dynamic works of him being with someone like that, but then being so off base in his movies with those types of characters. But he is, and I feel bad. Like I don't want to shit too hard on him just because I know like obviously like some shit happened with his family like post BVS into Justice League. So, but he makes it really hard to not.
The point is, even before that, like long before that happened, his art, well, his I'll put quotes around art, was not anything special.
Well, yeah.
Like, even looking back at Watchmen, a lot of people actually like Watchmen or like 300. I haven't seen 300 still, but looking back at Watchmen, like I was like,
yeah,
it's very Zack Snyder.
The thing is, Zack Snyder is just a dude bro. Like that's all he is, and like his take on everything is just a dude bro take. And like I think 300 is, I enjoy 300, but the thing is 300 is about a bunch of dude bros. So like there's no depth there that he needs to convey. It's literally just a dude bro action movie, so it's fine. Like you said, Dan, though, like Watchmen is a satire about comic books. Like in the comic, when people are like, there are action scenes, it's supposed to be like dumb, like because it's about people in the real world that are imitating comic books. So it's just like schlubby people in costumes that don't really know how to fight, and it's supposed to be dumb, but then in the Watchmen movie, like they're really badass and in slow motion, and it's like, oh, so
much slow
you
motion.
Completely miss the subtext of what Watchmen is about. Like you are just literally adapting it. But to your point, Dan, because like I was saying, like I don't want to give him shit, and in these discussions these next few weeks, I really want to try as much as possible just to like dissect from a comic book fan what I think is wrong with these movies. But as much as I don't want to give him shit, and as much as I know he's been through some stuff, I just today, or like a couple days ago, he released this quote, and I just need to read it to you because it was like I've been in this mood of like, you know what, I'm gonna leave him alone, leave Brittany alone, you know what I mean? I'm just gonna talk about his art. I'm gonna leave Zach alone as a person.
Not comparing Zack Snyder to Britney Spears.
Well, I was in my head, but then this happened. Then he said, someone asked him about like negative criticism of his movies, and this is what he said, quote, "I haven't found anything within the criticism that would make me believe or change anything I do," end quote. Okay, fuck you. That's my prelude to what is gonna happen next week when I talk about him. So
that's an excellent segue into what will be our next episode, which, if we haven't made that clear, is going to be Batman v Superman. I think we agreed on the extended, right?
The ultimate.
The director's cut, the Snyder cut.
I believe it's the only one that's like
3 hours
available at this point.
Oh yeah, you were mentioning that last time. Actually, it's like the special editions of the original Star Wars trilogy. Like it's impossible to find the original anymore.
And I just need to reiterate that I think this is coming from the perspective not of people. Like, I feel like whenever people take shots at DC movies recently, it's the immediate blowback is like, well, you just don't get DC, or you don't like DC. And I think this is coming from the perspective of people that, A, genuinely want to like every comic book movie that they see, like, regardless of company, like, who fucking cares? Like, I think we all just really want good comic book movies. And then, specifically on my side of things, someone who is, like, so into DC that I just want it done right. Like, it's so frustrating when I watch the MCU and I'm like, this is amazing. And there's no reason DC couldn't do this. There's literally none. Like, they have just as many cool characters, and all you needed was...
But also, like, it doesn't even matter how many cool characters you have to start with, because Marvel transforms so many of their characters, you just get the right artist.
Yeah, and that's what's so frustrating, especially about Man of Steel, is, again, we're talking about the most iconic, recognizable character ever. And, you know, you get this.
And in this movie, he couldn't even compete with, like, Star-Lord from Guardians of the Galaxy, which is, like, a comic that no one cared about before the movie.
It's just, you know, like, I hear stories, there are all these stories of, like, Superman movies that didn't happen, and if you can, like, not just to listeners, but even, like, just you guys, Carol and Dan, if you can, like, seek out these, like, YouTube videos and watch them or whatever, but there was, like, J.J. Abrams was going to make a Superman movie in the early 2000s. In the 90s.
Really?
Yeah, in the 90s, Kevin Smith was working on, like, a script for a Superman movie. And he actually has, like, funny... If you listen to any of his podcasts or stuff, he's told the story of kind of how that broke apart, and it's pretty funny. There was, like, a producer who was, like, asking for really dumb stuff to be in the movie. He was like, we need a scene where Superman fights a polar bear, because, like, polar bears are, like, big right now. And Kevin Smith was like, bro, what are you talking about?
Oh, it was the comic editor approach where it's, like, find what's big right now and...
Exactly. But it's so funny, like,
there
thinking
was a polar
back,
bear in this one.
There is. And when Kevin Smith reviewed this movie, he was like, I can't help but notice there was a polar bear in this fucking movie. But
where was the polar bear?
I just have a note saying, I wonder if it was real. It was when they were
in the
panning
Arctic.
over the Arctic. It was for a second. It wasn't important at all.
Yeah, it's just so funny to me to look at the pedigree of, like Kevin Smith, huge comic book fan, comic book writer, being tapped to literally write a comic book movie. Oh my god, that would have been so cool. Directors like Tim Burton was going to make a Superman movie. Probably would have been weird, but whatever. Like
with Nicolas Cage. Yeah.
Nicolas Cage's son's name is Kal-El.
Seriously?
Are you fucking serious?
No, his son's name... You guys didn't know this? His son's name is Kal-El Cage. Yeah, I swear to God. Look it up.
What a nerd.
Is it spelled with, like, a dash?
I think so, yeah.
That's
weird.
He's
a weirdo.
Even for Nicolas Cage.
He's weird. And then, yeah, like, J.J. Abrams then talked to make a Superman movie. And then, instead of any of that, which would have been at least something, we get Zack Snyder's vision for the DC universe. Again, to quote The Dark Knight, you know, DC turned to a man that they didn't really understand. And they didn't know what they were unleashing. And what they were unleashing was just a cinematic universe that was doomed to fail from the start. Anyway, on that note...
I guess we'll leave it there until next time.
Well, also, follow us on Instagram. We will be asking you if you have any questions that you want us to address when discussing our next feature film, Batman vs. Superman, on our story. So check that out and send us questions, and we'll do our best to answer. Whether it's about our opinions or you want us to research some stuff, we'll do it all.
Or even just general questions about anything. Except
about how we're doing.
Make it related to us and our movies, I would say, you know.
If it's too off topic, we might just answer you privately.
Yeah. Exactly. Alright, guys. I'd also just like to point out for listeners, if you have a nice alcoholic beverage that you like to drink, just get it ready for next week. You know what I mean? Like, next week is just going to be...
Start pouring.
It's not going to be a review. Next week is just going to be, I think, an autopsy. And I think the three of us are just going to get a little bit sloshed, and we're just going to talk about our feelings about that movie. So...
Love talking about my feelings.
Me too.
It's going to be fun.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks for listening.
All right, guys.
Yeah.
Free Britney.
Free Britney. I don't even know what that's... I've seen all the hashtags and stuff, and I'm like, I'm so out of the loop. I don't know.
Oh, Marco, I'll tell you everything off air. It's a journey. We did Britney bad. Poor
Sounds
Brittany. The end. Bye.
Bye.
All right, thanks.